This is a story of 3 disturbing encounters with the same man. I was 15 years old at the time, and went out to a weekend afternoon movie with my friend. We were early, so we decided to look around a nearby toy store to kill some time before the previews began. I was strolling absent-mindedly down an aisle by myself, looking at toys I felt far too old for, when I heard an odd whistle. If you've ever heard the iPhone notification chime, then you have an idea of the sound I heard. I thought nothing of it, since it could have been someone's phone while they were moving through the aisles. Eventually, I met back up with my friend. We walked around a bit more, talking and laughing, until I heard the whistle once again. Being preoccupied with my conversation, I still didn't pay much attention to it. On our way out of the store, I heard the whistle for a third time, but much closer, practically right over my shoulder, and I whipped around mid-sentence. A man stood there, grinning from ear to ear in a strangely sinister way. The smile didn't fully reach his eyes. He was a bit on the small side, scraggly, with long hair tied back in a low ponytail. He had on a tattered black t-shirt which hung loosely off his thin frame and a bulging black drawstring backpack. "Hi," he said, stretching his lips even wider around his contrastingly bright white smile. As a teenage girl, I was no stranger to the attention of older men, but something about his persona and approach set me on edge. Still, I was taught to be polite. "Hi," I responded tentatively, taking a step backwards and away from his intense stare. "I've noticed you around the store, and thought I could get your opinion on something." He unfurls a crumpled, stained copy of the toy store's weekly ad, and pointedly stabs at the Barbie doll selection with his index finger. "See, I'm looking for the perfect doll for my niece, and I just have no idea which one to pick. What do you think?" He looks up and smiles, but his eyes are dark pools of nothingness, devoid of any real interest. "This one is nice," I say, pointing to a doll at random, hardly looking at the ad. "Wow, thank you. I really appreciate that. By the way, has anyone ever told you how pretty you are? You must go to the gym often. Which one do you go to?" Taken aback by his abrupt stream of rehearsed pickup lines, I said thank you, and forced a laugh. I was young, and so was my friend. Our inexperience and his strange approach kept us frozen in place. His eyes bore only into mine, and his grin, wider still and deeply disconcerting, never faded from his face. "Hey, do you want to be friends? I'd like very much to be friends with you. And you know what friends do? They take pictures together. Let's take a picture together, since we're friends." He holds up a red flip phone with a front cover held together by a rubber band. He activates the front-facing camera, and before I can say anything, he leans into me, face uncomfortably close, and snaps the picture. He looks at it briefly, smiles, and pockets his phone. "There now, we're friends," he says matter-of-factly, and turns his gaze back to me, appraisingly. Stupidly, in a horrified daze, I nodded. He proceeded to ask where I was from, where I was going, and what I liked to do, in quick succession, before I could even answer any of them. Luckily, my friend put her hand on my arm, breaking me from my stupor. "We have to go. My dad's waiting," I said, while turning and leaving. My last, but not final, glimpse of him was with his head cocked to the side and that wide smile spread across his face. His eyes were flickering with something I can only recall as amusement. We turned our backs, and as soon as we got far enough away, we ran. Fast forward to a year and a half later. I'm in my junior year of high school, and on the early morning city bus headed to my first class of the day. The bus is packed, and I squeezed my way to the back, reaching out a hand to grab the pole as the bus brakes sharply. I hear a whistle close to my ear. When I heard it again, I adjusted my earbuds in my ears. Why isn't that person answering their phone? A hand closed right above mine on the pole. It was too close, and her fingers brushed, but the person held their hand there almost intentionally. I moved my hand and glanced up into the broad smile of the creepy man from the toy store. Cold chills shot down my spine, and I gripped the pole even harder until my knuckles turned white. He tilted his head, still smiling his toothy grin, and said, "Hi, friend." The bus is so jam-packed that there's nowhere else for me to go, so I turned my body as far away from him as possible, hoping that playing dumb would work in my favor and he would go away. He leans closer still and says, "Hi, do you remember me?" I shook my head and leaned as far away as I could in the tight space. He frowned and looked suddenly angry. "No, I know you. We met before. We're friends." I shook my head again, looking down, pretending to be engrossed in my music player. I thought maybe if he didn't get a full look at my face, he might think he had confused me with someone else. "No, I have your picture," he says, and reaches into his drawstring bag, pulling out his red flip phone held together by frayed rubber bands. All the while, I'm thinking if he sees me get off at the stop to my school, he'll know where I am every day and can find me easily. But if I get off at a random stop before my school, he could get off with me, and I have nowhere else to go. He's still scrolling through his phone, and I'm imagining all the other girls' pictures he might have on there when he asks. "So, what school do you go to?" I thought about saying mind your own business, but remembered his angry frown from before and gave him the name of another school. It didn't really make sense because the bus only went past one high school and not the one I told him about, but he nodded at this and said, "Hold on, I have your picture somewhere here. We're friends." The bus pulled up to my high school, and there was nothing else I could do but to get off. While he's still preoccupied with his phone, I lose myself in the crowd and run all the way to school. I was shivering when I got to my first period classroom, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I asked my boyfriend to take the bus with me every morning for the next few weeks. I also changed my route, going to and from school, and thankfully, I didn't see him again. Unfortunately, I did mention there were 3 encounters with this man. 2 years later, I was a sophomore in college. I was taking the bus home alone after a late night with my friends when I heard a weird whistle. Enough time had passed that it didn't alarm me, and thus I proceeded to exit the bus at my stop. It was completely dark out, and I was one of the 2 people who got off. Then from behind me, I hear, "Hello there, do you remember me?" I turned around and it was him again. It was hard to make out his features in the dark, but I instantly remember the tone of his voice, recall the whistle, and tilted head and the wide, toothy smile. I see what looks like a backpack strapped to the front of his chest. "No," I said, and started walking faster, heart racing, wondering how fast I could run in these flip-flops. I heard him picking up speed behind me and I glanced back. He was starting to run at me, his hands in his backpack, digging around for something that I didn't want to know. He was angry, smile gone, and he shouted at me, "So you want to be that way?" I started running, and I didn't stop until I safely got home. I haven't had any run-ins with him lately, and I hope I never do. Unfortunately, though, you just never know. This story is relatively long. I apologize in advance. I am immensely grateful for this subreddit, because I find this story difficult to explain to people. I questioned myself for a long time, but finally concluded that I was, in fact, stalked. It all started when I began a new job as a lifeguard and swim instructor at a university pool. The first person I ever shared a shift with was a guy named Harry. He was fairly odd, quite socially awkward, and had a quirky sense of humor. However, after the first couple of weeks of work, Harry started to strike up some pretty deep conversations with me. He asked me a lot of personal information about my family, how I grew up, what I enjoy, my relationship with my now husband. This didn't strike me as particularly odd, as I'm a very extroverted, social human, and I love talking to people about my life. His questions started to have a lot more depth, as he began asking me deep questions about the meaning of life, my faith, and my beliefs. I'm a Christian, so I saw this as a great opportunity to explain what I believe and why. Harry began to open up about his family life in a way that made me uncomfortable. He described his parents in a way that made me feel like he had no emotional connection to them, even though they were very clearly emotionally connected to him. He would describe his mother as being passive and stupid, unwilling to stand up for herself, and his father as, quote, living in fear by over-controlling Harry's actions. As time went on, the way he talked got more extreme. He kept talking about how he was different from everyone, and how he was a, quote, monster. A few times, after our late-night shifts, he would drive me home to my house. I often walked, but I took him up on his offers to drive when I could. He would talk to me a lot during our shifts, which as it is, wasn't the smartest thing to do as a lifeguard. One time, a lady hopped into the deep end who didn't know how to swim. I saw it and ran to the scene, but Harry just watched. I asked him later why he didn't come and help me, but he shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal. He also began to self-disclose a lot of personal information that I felt like we weren't at the right level of friendship for. He told me he was a virgin, and then told me he wanted to have sex, so he knew how to feel. He texted me when he lost his virginity, without any protection by the way, and said that he gave the girl pleasure, but that he didn't feel anything, and just finished on his own. A few weeks into his relationship with this girl, he texted me saying that he thought he had AIDS, which later turned out to be false. All of this information might seem like unnecessary details, I know, but they are details that are embedded in my mind that make me wonder how I could have missed some of the signs. Harry continued to text me about his emotions and lack of empathy for others. He also talked about his plan to leave home and move to Australia. He had several $1,000s saved up, which he occasionally made me think he would give to me. In a conversation once, he casually mentioned, "I don't know what to do with my money," and then later went, "Man, I could just give it all to you." He said it half joking and half serious, but with a tone that made me wonder if he understood the gravity of what he was saying. I was an engaged college student trying to pay for a wedding and live on more than just my rent every month. He knew that very well, but lorded his money over me without a thought that it might be a cruel thing to do. He continuously talked to me about an empty property that he had the keys to, and how he liked to take his, quote, friends there to explore the house. I didn't think much of it, but I started to get a really weird feeling about the things he was telling me. I was open with my fiancé about the texts he was sending me, and the types of questions he was asking me. We both agreed it wasn't comfortable for either of us. He continued to text me late at night, saying that I was one of his only friends. He often talked about his mental health and how he wanted to end things. He also talked about how smart he was, that he was at genius level of intelligence and everyone was stupid and empathetic. Many of our conversations circulated around these topics, as well as his sex life and some of the dumb decisions he was making at the risk of his own health and others. The turning point happened late one night, at 1 a.m. or so, when he sent me a text asking a hypothetical question that I knew wasn't hypothetical. He said, "If I drive over and knock on your door, will you say, 'Harry, it's too late, go home'? Or will you either willingly let me into your house, or leave your house to take on the world with me. I was confused and asked him to elaborate, and he said that he had the keys to this house and asked if I wanted to explore it with him. It should be noted that the house was in a very sketchy part of town. I said no and told him that I wouldn't be very comfortable doing that with anyone, especially on that side of town. However, I got the niggling feeling that he was at my door, and sure enough, when I looked out my window, I saw him walking back to his vehicle from my doorstep. That was the most distinctive moment that I thought to myself, he might be a stalker. I had a panic attack and called my fiancée. We were in a long-distance relationship at the time, and pulled my roommate into my room so that I could explain the situation to them. In the following weeks, Harry continued to text me daily, if not hourly, asking me where I was, and if we could meet up somewhere. I often lied or made up excuses about why I couldn't. Eventually, he said he would be leaving for Australia and was planning on deleting all social media. He asked me for my email address and any other possible way of staying in touch with him, which I very guiltily did not give him. Finally, he left. I felt so much relief and felt like I wasn't being watched anymore, or had to worry about something happening to me. It took me a really long time to acknowledge that he was a stalker. I decided to ask some female coworkers about him, especially ones I had heard were closer to him. The first thing I noticed, that there was a type. We were all blonde, curvy, and strong-willed women, and we all had the same kinds of interactions with him. We would listen to him and have conversations with him, and he would text us late at night. Later, I brought up his stalkerish tendencies to a coworker who had similar experiences, and she mentioned that the house he kept referring to was where he would take women to have sex with him. There were many moments when I wondered if he might be a sociopath, possibly higher functioning, or had some other mental health issues going on besides major depression. He was isolated as a child in a very strict religious environment and wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I know this experience might not be a particularly extreme example of stalking, but it haunts me to this day. Regardless, I'm grateful to have this subreddit to vent to, and even more so that I don't have to deal with Harry anymore.